Is this the best speaker, front to back, top to bottom, that I've ever heard? I don't know. Maybe kind of. Sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the SVS Prime Pinnacle floor standing speaker. I have heard a fair number of speakers at this point, and I've measured all of them. Just kidding. Listened to them, measured them with my brain measurement devices, sound, listening. Anyway, I've listened to a lot of speakers, and most of them have been bookshelf speakers. However, these are floor standing speakers. I am not a big floor standing speaker fan. I prefer the little bookshelves. I don't know why. Probably because they're easier to move around and easier to ship back to the manufacturer. But I still listen to tower speakers, floor standing speakers. I just don't have nearly as much experience with floor standers as I do with bookshelves. So when I saw these speakers all the way at Expona last year, I got excited and I thought I really need to get these in to listen to them. They've been upstairs in my theater room, which is the playroom, although almost all the stuff is out of there now. So it really is mostly a theater room or watching TV room. It's not really a theater room because there's one part of the upstairs is completely open. We do more watching in there than anything else, although there's a drum set up there that isn't really used. Let's talk about some specs. One of the biggest things that kind of held me back from really wanting to get these in are the price. They're not crazy expensive. There are two types of finishes. One is a black ash, which is a dull, kind of duller, and I actually prefer this finish. It's a duller vinyl wrap, okay? And then there's a gloss black, which piano black. So the duller black ash is $1,800 a pair, okay? If you want the fancy gloss black finish, it's $2,000 for a pair of these, okay? Still kind of expensive. However, there are the Wharfdale Linton. They come in around $1,800 a pair if you get the stands. There are the KLH Mono 5, which are over $2,000. The Klipsch Heresy 17, whatever number they're up to now, they're also over, I think they're over $3,000. There are a lot of tower speakers in this price range and above this price range. I know you could say that the Heresies aren't really a tower speaker. Anyway, there's a few speakers that I've listened to that are in this price range. Heck, I think even the Aperion tower speakers, some of them I've heard are in this price range. Even though $1,800 sounds expensive, it's not ridiculously expensive when it comes to tower speakers. These are made up of they have a unique design. Three 6.5-inch woofers for bass duties, one 5.25-inch driver for mid-range duty, and then one aluminum dome tweeter for treble duty. Stated frequency response is 29 hertz up to 25,000 hertz. 29 hertz is low. We'll get into that here in a little bit when we talk about bass. Sensitivity is 88 dB, which isn't super sensitive, but is definitely not tough to drive. These are an 8 ohm nominal impedance speaker. All of this means that these are not crazy hard to drive. Most, if any, AVR receivers are going to do just fine with it. Most, even lower powered amplifiers are going to drive this speaker well. However, I found that these did like a bit of juice, a little bit of power. I've had these on the Vidar, the first generation, not the second generation. I had them on the Vidar. I've had them on a Mac 7270 Macintosh. That's a vintage amplifier. But the one I listen to it the most is on a new Secret amplifier receiver that's not quite out yet. They like that one. On the back you have 2-inch wide flange ports. So these are ported speakers. The grills fit on there nicely. It is a pin, so you have to not magnetic grill, which is I think something that people have complained about in the past with SVS. Personally, I don't really care, but for $2,000, people probably want magnets. It's all about magnets and ball bearings these days. What movie is that from? You can check out all of these specs in greater detail. These are the same similar drivers that SVS uses on all of their speakers. It's just now you have an extra 5¼ inch mid-range. Crossover points, 300 for the bass, and then mid-range, and then 2100 for the treble. So I like this. I like three-way. If I'm getting a tower speaker, I want it to be a true three-way. Now this is a true three-way. One mid-range driver, one tweeter, 3 woofers. Let's talk about bass. A bass, bass robot. It's terrible, isn't it? This is you're watching it. You should blame yourself that this is this bad, but yet you continue to watch the bass robot. Bass here is very palpable, very punchy, and I love it. It is so punchy and so enjoyable that I wasn't sitting there, I don't know, peeling back the onion, being like, ooh, I wonder, what is the bass clarity like? What is the tone and texture like? It was just perfect. It was one of those speakers that completely got me either into the music or into the movie without even having to ask it to. Some speakers, you turn it on and you're like, I'm not like, I have to listen to this speaker. But some speakers are just like, it's almost right into work. We're going to critically listen to bass, mid-range, and treble. One thing about this speaker that jumped off the page was just how punchy it was. But it wasn't slop. It wasn't punch for the sake of having punch, because these enclosures are very well built, very inert. So the bass that I'm hearing here is not being smeared, and it's not like cream cheese on a bagel or anything like that. It's tight, but yet it's very punchy. I think maybe some of the amplification has something to do with that as well. But the takeaway is these speakers, if you have good to great levels of power, are going to reward you with an immense amount of bass punch that is clean and not covering up any mid-range clarity. Narcissistic Cannibal. You don't even need a subwoofer. You don't. It's good to have a subwoofer, and I was using a subwoofer when I was watching all of my movies. But with music, no subwoofer required. 29 hertz. It's just so good. A lot of speakers, even though they go down to 29 hertz or even into the low 30s, I still feel like I need a subwoofer because it just doesn't feel balanced. And these were up in my upstairs listening room, so sometimes it's not the greatest room, but for whatever reason, these things were just flawless. I had them about 16 inches from the wall. They're not super deep, which is nice because you're not going to be tripping over these things. They are a good size. We'll get into that in the final thoughts, though. Overall bass is punchy, powerful, clean enough that I wasn't even thinking about how clean or how covered up it was. It's a good sign with a speaker when I just sit back and I'm immediately enjoying the music or the movies. Let's talk about mid-range. Mid-range here is great for me because I don't like mid-range pushed all the way forward in my face. Female vocals, Alanis Morissette, King of Pain, off the MTV Unplugged, little step back. And not as like crystalline clear. Also, Adele, Hello by Adele. Also, smoky romantic. So mid-range here with female vocals especially is not otherworldly crystal clear. And it's completely fine. It was actually a very enjoyable mid-range experience. Male vocals, more baritone. I would say mid-range here leans a little bit warm-ish. It kind of reminds me of the Wharfdale Linton, not the KLH Model 5. There's enough clarity in there, but more importantly, the way they have the mid-range mixed in with the rest of the frequency response is utterly perfect for me. It is not too forward, not too grainy. There's no bumps that are distracting. It's a perfect mid-range integration. Some people may not like it because they may feel like it's stepped back ever so slightly. I don't even think it's stepped back. I just think that there's such a good flat-ish frequency response here that it doesn't seem like anything is out of place. I love the mid-range. Male, female vocals, acoustic guitars, Again, sound great. I wasn't dissecting this with a scalpel though, the whole time, because I was enjoying it too much. Let's talk about treble. Treble on these is different from other SVS speakers. I've had the Bookshelf, the Ultra in here. I own the Prime Bookshelf, the 6.5-inch woofer version. It's a little bit different in direct comparison. I don't think it's different if you really lean into it. I think what's different here is that there's that dedicated mid-range driver that does such a good job of evening out the frequency response. Not saying that the two-ways are not even in their frequency response. It just seems like they have a more prevalent top end. I think the top end's the same. I think it's the mid-range on the tower speakers or the Pinnacles that are a little bit different from the rest of the SVS line, at least the one that I've heard. Aluminum dome tweeters can be for me sometimes. I think SVS does the best job of implementing an aluminum dome tweeter without it sounding exactly like an aluminum dome tweeter. Like the KLH Model 5, they sounded great. They had a couple of songs that they just excelled at. Some songs, I wasn't doing backflips over the KLH Model 5 integration of the aluminum dome tweeter. However, on the Prime bookshelves, on the Ultra bookshelves, it had a bit of that aluminum dome vibe to it. Wasn't obnoxious, wasn't in your face. This one, if I didn't know that it had an aluminum dome, I wouldn't have known. You could have said this was a soft dome tweeter. I would have believed you. Now, I wouldn't believe you if you said it was a air motion tweeter, but soft dome, definitely would believe you. Cymbals were well behaved, not harsh, almost not rolled off, but the treble response on here is so balanced with the mid-range, and I think it's the mid-range driver. Treble is airy enough when it needs to be, but not out of hand, not screeching, not shh. Oh, and there's zero sibilance, and I was so excited because some aluminum dome tweeters can be a little bit in a not here. Harvester of Sorrow was it was almost like listening to another version or some remastered version of Harvester of Sorrow where the cymbals are not just Alanis Morissette's MTV Unplugged record has a lot of sibilance in it recorded, but this almost eliminated all of it. So that 6K range, definitely not a spike, around 6.4, 6K, wherever sibilance is at. Very well done. What are my final thoughts? I think this is one of the best speakers I've heard front to back, top to bottom. Nothing sticks out, except it's enjoyable. It pulls me in. And it has almost as much personality as the Wharfedale Linton. Not quite the quirkiness of the Linton, but it is so enjoyable, such a balanced frequency response. Nothing is jumping out with the exception of a little bit of bass punch, but even that is still in line with the rest of the frequency response and the rest of the presentation. It is a different presentation from most of the SVS products that I've heard. A little bit more well behaved on the top end, but even those speakers aren't bad. They're actually quite good. This is just a different presentation, a slightly different sound signature from the rest of their line. To be fair, I've never heard their Ultra Towers, so I have no idea what those sound like. But the other speakers that I've had in, this sounds a little bit more refined, a little bit more mature. I think this is more of an audiophile speaker. With movies, it was incredible. I took off the center channel speaker. Most mixes for TV and movies were perfect. I felt no need to have a center channel. However, most people have a center channel. This is one of the best speakers that can run dual duty with music and movies. One of the things that makes me most nervous is when a speaker sounds incredible for movies. Sounds awesome. A lot of times the mid-range on that may be a bit in your face, but when I switched it to music though, flawless speaker. I think you could really kind of delve deep into this and maybe criticize it for some. I don't really have any criticisms of this speaker outside of maybe some people think it's too expensive. But even at $1,800, there's not a lot of competition here. Yes, Klipsch make some tower speakers in this price category. The frequency response, though, and the overall presentation, the SVS, I think, is a much better speaker if you're looking for a flatter frequency response while not being boring. Emotiva also has speakers in this price category. Their new tower speaker, I think, falls within the same price category here. The T2 Plus, I think the T3 Plus, I think the T3 Plus, now I haven't had that one in here in my house, but I did listen to it in Austin. I think the T3 Plus and this Prime Pinnacle are the easiest to compare speakers. Different sound signature though. I think if you get these, you are not going to be disappointed. Don't go into this thinking that they're going to have this super exciting presentation though, even though I don't want to give the impression these aren't exciting. These are. They're just really well balanced. They're a more mature speaker. And for a lot of people, this could be an end game speaker for them. Also, they're not super huge. So even though they're big speaker, they're not big front to back. They're not a deep, deep speaker. So you can put these just about anywhere if you have room for a floor standing speaker. Absolutely great speaker. Couldn't recommend this enough. $1,800 is going to be pushing a lot of people's budget. I get it. But I think these are worth every penny of the $1,800 asking price. So if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/cheaponlyman. Every Sunday night we have Patreon-only Zooms, Patreon-only Discord, Patreon-only Facebook group. You can also use the links in the description. Those are affiliate links, which means if you click and you buy, I get a commission, but it doesn't cost you any more. So it's a great way to support the channel. You can also use the thanks button down by the share button. Give me a couple of dollars, buy me a cup of coffee, but don't feel compelled to buy me anything. You can also buy one of these awesome coffee mugs. Links under the video. It says Rocktopus on one side and then binge listen and fill your soul with happiness on the other side. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu unless you're listening to it or watching the soundtracks coming through your new SVS Prime Pinnacle Tower. Binge listen maybe through your Prime Pinnacle Towers and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.